Thanks for joining us today. This will be the third SWUG meeting this year. Just rounding out summer. Hopefully it's starting to cool off a little bit. Hopefully everyone's surviving. And I just wanted to take a second. We'll probably say something at the end as well, but wanted to say thank you again to our sponsor, Impact Systems, and everything they're providing is all the prizes we'll enjoy and just I'll have Justin kind of introduce himself a little bit later, but yeah, so anyway, thank you again to Impact. All right, let's jump in. If my mouse is working. There we go. All right, so my name is Dylan Pratt with InterLink Engineering. We're hosting the event today at our office, and I'm just going to present a kind of a generic title, tips and tricks. I usually try to fill in a couple things that may just be something we use around the office that maybe not a lot of people know, or something we noted that was pretty cool. Maybe a cool new tool or something popped up, and yeah, that's what we're going to go through today. I've got a little bit of a unique tool. We're just going to do one. It's going to involve texturing parts, and it's going to be using some stuff outside of SolidWorks, as well as using SolidWorks 3D texture tool. If anyone doesn't have experience with that already, we'll be touching base on that. And this will be involving HP's new texture tool website and their resources that they've put together, which I think are pretty cool and were pretty interesting. So this is going to be mostly a demo. So I'm going to, whoa. It's going to be mostly a demo. So we're just going to jump right in, and I'll just be kind of doing everything live. But everything I'm doing here is on this link, or I'm sorry, not everything I'm doing, but a lot of the resources I'm going to be pulling up here involve this link. So I'm just going to kind of leave that on the screen for a minute. You can follow that. And yeah, let's go. So, yep. Let's go over. So if you go to that link, this will take you to HP's 3D texture library resource. For reference, I will also drop it into the chat real quick for anyone that we can like kind of share that later. But so in here, they kind of just go through the texture tool. This is more of like kind of a reference page of what they're talking about, how what their textures look like. It gives you a little photo show. It only just occurred to me that I'm showing everything in dark mode, so just so that it doesn't look so different to you, in case like, why did it look different when he was sharing it? This is probably what the website normally looks like, not in dark mode. And they're just kind of going through, like I said, an overview of their stuff. Now, we'll talk about it more in a little bit, but one of the things you'll want to do if you're diving into their textures is actually request the texture samples. So you just fill out a little bit of information. It's not asking a lot here, and you can not sign up per se. Don't give you more marketing emails or anything. But what they do is send you a link a few seconds after that'll give you about 1.5 gigs of data to help with the texturing and everything we're going to go over. And it's really useful. It's really cool that they're sharing all that. They're pretty open about it. But they can also, you can also essentially pay them to help with the texturing as well if you needed help with it, but they're also providing all the assets, which is extremely useful. And they even have a texture booklet, if anyone's familiar with like the old MT, I can't remember what the company is called, but like, anyway, injection mold, it's their textures that are intended to be able to be printed, but you can also get a booklet from them. And then talk about their services, as I was mentioning before. You can also get some help and essentially pay them to do the texturing for you. And then all the way at the bottom is this tool. So that's what we're going to dive into. So what they've essentially made here is like a 3D viewer for textures, for model textures. So they provide just a on here by default, there's a couple objects, just a sphere or a cube to kind of just see what the textures look like, you know, just to click around for a second, kind of just see what the textures look like. And you can play with some of the settings, how much offset, scale, which we're going to play with all these settings in a minute. I'm just kind of showing you. So if you don't have your own model, that's a way you can play with the textures, just kind of get an idea what these things would look like. But where it really gets cool is that they let you do your own models. So I'm going to go to this SWUG folder here. And oh, sorry, I realized now I clicked the wrong import. That's why my file wasn't there. I'll go to 3D models import. And I'm going to import my own grip. So this is actually, so this is an STL I outputted earlier. I'll show you real quick the solid model. So this is a golf grip. And what we want to do is apply textures, or we're experimenting, maybe is a better way to look at it, with what textures could look like on this grip. Now the tool does have some limitations. In reality, I don't want to apply texture to every face. I want to apply texture to only some faces. This really applies textures to the whole body. But where it excels is just being able to quickly look at what the texture would look like without having to go through the steps of like not worrying about individual faces or anything else. Just like, hey, I want to really just quickly say, what if I made this texture a little bit bigger, change the offset? Maybe I wanted to be a little bit bigger, like taller. You know, I can play with all these settings extremely fast, way faster than any modeling software that I'm familiar with, and definitely SolidWorks, which we're going to dive into here in a bit, is a little bit more clunky on how they apply textures and turning the images into textures. It's possible, and it's ultimately needed to get the final product. But where this really excels is being able to do this. And the other thing you can do, which is pretty cool because it's a free online tool, if you've got a client or a boss or a manager, whatever, right? Somebody or someone else on the team, and you know, like how many times has somebody tried to describe to you, well, I kind of want it to look like this or feel like this, and they can't really draw the verbal picture, or it's just a very difficult verbal picture to draw. But you can say, okay, if you want it to have a texture, and you're rather than them trying to explain it to you for 45 minutes and going back and forth with them 20 times because it's not quite what they wanted, but you thought it was based on their description. Instead of any of that, just tell them to come to the website. You can give them the STL output and tell them just play with the textures until you feel like you've got that what you want, and then take a picture of the model and of the model and the settings, because that'll be helpful reference for you. And then essentially now you know what to create for them inside SolidWorks in a more ready for manufacturing way. And I'm just re-importing this because I was screwing around with the sliders so much that I got a little off track, and I think it's just easier to reset rather than I don't think they have like a return to defaults button, so I just kind of refresh and then you're good to go. You can also turn off auto update if you don't want it to update while you're dragging around settings, but I'm just leaving that on for the purposes of the demo. And what I'm going to try and do is just apply a texture that I think looks pretty good, and then we'll essentially kind of show you how to do that in SolidWorks also, and go from there. So I think this personally already looks pretty much like what I'm going for. I don't want to be too boring, so we can try to expand and change things a little bit. I actually want this to be 30 thou, and you can type in all these values. So we're going to raise up the texture 30 thou, and I'm really focusing in my eyes. I'm not paying attention to the areas I don't care about. I'm paying attention to like this big area right here. This is what I want textured. These little areas here ultimately are not what I'm texturing. So I don't really care what those look like. But I can see here, this is really what I want. This is what it looks like. And I have a physical grip here that I'll grab in a minute that has a texture applied. It actually ended up being a little different texture than this, but for the purposes of the demo, I'm going to continue with this one. And then, yeah, so you have a couple options, other things to adjust, some coloring and stuff as well for images. Thank you, sir. Here, actually, you want to pass that around? Look at that and pass that around. There's also a texture sample on my desk. Did you grab that? Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to grab that. We also printed a texture sample, and I'll show you. Actually, I meant to pull up that a second ago. Before we switch back to SolidWorks, I'll also show you what you get from the HP download because it's pretty cool. And that's where you can apply these as well. So anyway, so now that we have that for reference, if I were to go back to SolidWorks here. Now, actually, I'm gonna, sorry, I take that back. I'm gonna go. This is that 1.5 gig download, and this is gonna be important for the next steps for SolidWorks. So this is gonna be all those assets I mentioned that SolidWorks is, I'm sorry, that HP is providing. This is where those are gonna be really handy because now I can take, for example, this is all those texture maps. They've given the actual PNG bitmap file that I can use, and everything's labeled. So I know I was using texture 7, for example, and actually already created a reference file earlier when I was just double checking some stuff. So I'm gonna delete that for now. But yeah, so I've already got the HP asset there for texture 7. And the other kind of cool thing they do is they also give the ability to text, or not text, they have the ability to, they give you reference files, basically files already, coupons with the texture already applied. So there's also these subfolders that have the texture in it. They also have printable files and some parameters in a text file that are pretty handy. They kind of tell you, okay, this is how we applied the texture for this coupon, and here's the approximate dimensions. So if you want to try to scale it to be extremely similar, this is how you would do it. This is really where I feel like it's pretty neat that HP has shared this because it's a really valuable tool. I'm just kind of, I should have opened this in the viewer. I accidentally opened this in the printing software, but just for reference, this is the coupon that they that you can just print on either your own printer or on the HP machine, whatever printer you've got handy, if you want to kind of get an idea what that texture will look like or feel like in person. If you've got a printer good enough to do it, it's not really ideal for FDM printing, which is what the Bamboo system was doing. But that's just that was my default, so that just opened up in there. But really, if you use the HP system, that's where you're going to replicate what they have best. Anyway, so now that I've got that bitmap file, let me go back over to SolidWorks. And we'll just kind of give you a quick example of how you would then apply that. So in this case, I'm just going to go apply that bitmap. So I'm going to click on the face, apply an appearance to that face, go to mapping. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I need to go to, I forgot, go to color image first. So I'm going to go find the image that I want to apply, which in this case is, and I'm going to change mine to looking at all the image files. Let's look at it this way, for example. I go, yep, that's the one I want right there. Let's tell it okay. They'll ask to save out the actual appearance file, which is fine. I'm going to save that. And once that loads, for some reason it's taking a second, not sure why. There it goes. So once that loads, now I've got my image mapped on my surface. There's a couple settings you could do to, you know, adjust the certain parameters of the image, but for my purposes, really the only thing I care about right now is the mapping page. So, and the reason I'm doing that is I need to scale this a little bit better. So if I go back here, you can see roughly. There's one thing I'd say it would be kind of nice if the HP online tool, if you had an ability to turn the texture on and off functionally, but see the bitmap, so you can have a better reference of like what that bitmap maybe looks like, or if they had like a scaled image or something of how big your thing is, because there is a texture scale here that you can use, but it doesn't show like just the image, it's on the texture. So you're doing a little bit more estimation, and they do give you data to try to better map that. So it's not that they don't give you anything, but I think it would just be a helpful quick reference. So they give you some data, you can try to like reverse out exactly what that scale means in your SolidWorks window, because of the way it imports the image. It's a little different than just trying to like match the scale one for one. But for my purposes, and in most cases, to be honest, with texture, an eyeballing is fine. You're kind of, getting it within a few thou or a few tens of thou of the size is not significantly different otherwise. So anyway, I think got the image about lined up, mapped on the way I want. Right now, I'm just going to do this one surface. And once we have that on there, I could apply this to all the surfaces if I want. It'll just take a lot longer to load, so I don't want to make you all wait. So let's just run the 3D texture tool, which in this case, I'm just going to search for up here rather than trying to find it in the menu. You select your body. In any of your faces that have a texture applied to it will show up here. I only have one right now, but if I have 20 faces, you'd have to activate each face. And then once you activate that face, now it doesn't look like much right now, but you got to change a few parameters here. So one, I'm going to try to match my offset that I did on HP, right? So my 30 thou displacement, in this case, they call it offset distance. It's the same thing. And then element size, we're just going to crank that all the way up because we want to be able to see all the detail on that texture. That's going to take just a second or two for that to load. So essentially what you're making is a tessellated like STL file when you're doing this. So that's what the element size is. And so to get good texture, you need pretty good element size or pretty small element size, relatively speaking. So crank that up. And now you can see texture here that looks a lot like over here. But rather than me trying to do that in SolidWorks for 20 minutes going back and forth with different bitmaps, being able to really quickly go, actually, what about that one? What about that one? Do I want it to look like, I don't know, cubes here? No, that's not quite what I want. But this would take so much longer in SolidWorks, and trying to do that and then communicate back and forth with your boss. The SolidWorks models take a lot less high quality photos, I would say. Like, I don't think the texture is easy to see. I've had to go back and forth with people a lot because it's not always obvious what the texture looks like, whereas they can see this and actually use this on any computer, I think, a lot easier. So I think that's also where it really shines, being able to share all that data. You do have to kind of tell them, like, don't worry about the fact that textures in those areas that you don't want, but just focus on those. Anyway, so then once you have that, you just accept those parameters, and now you've got your textured file. Now you'll notice, well, I'm going to point it out to you, you may not have noticed, you actually now have two files. You have an STL file or a graphics body, that tessellated file we just created, and you have the actual model. So it's not a real SolidWorks watertight body when you do that that graphics feature and add that texture. So you can't, for the most part, there's theoretically some ways to get around it or kind of hack it together a little bit, but essentially that texture you want to be the last feature in your model. You don't want to try to apply a texture and then say, okay, and then I'll add the texture and then do a revolve or something. That's not really going to be a good workflow. You really want that to be the last item in your in your feature tree. And then more than likely, a lot of times you'll either suppress it or just roll above it anytime you have the model up and you're trying to do other things, because that is not a feature you want rebuilding the whole time.
It's watertight to where you can print it from it, right?
Correct. It should be printable. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes they might import and say there's a little micro mini face missing or something, but typically you can just kind of auto heal that and it'll, fill whatever like tiny gap it is. Technically, it should be watertight, yeah. And it does a pretty good job. We've done this pretty regularly with different types of models and had good results. Yeah, let me go back. Speaking of question, oops, click the wrong button there. Of questions, I think I've kind of covered the topic. Any other questions?
Your own shape.
I'm sorry, say that one.
You say you can make your own shape and then import it as a picture, or you were saying you could just do it natively in Solid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sure, I can show that. Yeah, sorry, I see what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. So you can, obviously there I used HP's texture because that's what's built into the software, and they've kind of done a lot of R&D to like prove out that these will work well. But that being said, SolidWorks does have their own build ones. I'm glad you mentioned that. I definitely can show that. Yeah, I'm trying to, sorry, I forgot where that folder is. You know what? I may not have the, is it appearance? Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. It's totally an appearance. It's not design library. Thank you. So in your appearances folder, there's one called texture maps. Actually, wait, no, that's the HP one, but they have one in, yeah, that's where I was looking for it. Thank you. In miscellaneous, SolidWorks has their own texture maps. So they have a few. It looks like they have a lot when you scroll through, but I'll be honest, like a lot of these are kind of the repeated, it more or less is a slightly different version of the same thing. So there's actually not that many here. But the other thing you can do, so if I drag, let's say for a second, I drag this one on. Well, usually let's do that. And I kind of locked up my SolidWorks. I think trying to do the zoom and play with some textures and different things might have locked it up. Well, for the moment, we'll see if it loads here in a second, but essentially you can apply that texture the same way I applied this. You could also do any one of these. You just click on the face, apply appearance, click one of those, and that's a SolidWorks built-in one. You can also grab any bitmap texture file that you can find online. Basically anything that's like a black white gradient will work. So I've used my own just looking around for things. Like I wanted something that looked a little bit more like granite kind of. I'm trying to think how to describe it, or like layered stone maybe is a better way to put it. And I didn't feel like any of the built-in ones, this was a little while ago, so this was before any of the HP ones. I think they actually have a pretty good one for that, but a while before that, the HP ones existed. I didn't feel like any of the SolidWorks ones looked really good, so I found a bitmap online that was like a shaded, it made it feel more like a layered rock look, and I had applied that.
Where was the command for making that STL out of that? You applied that to the surface, but then you could create it in STL.
Yeah, definitely. So that would be in, man, I'm really, I don't know what happened, but my SolidWorks is not happy. I mean, I might just force close SolidWorks and reopen it, and I'll show you again. I'm sure no one else here has ever had these kinds of SolidWorks issues, because we all know SolidWorks is extremely reliable and never has any problem. Definitely, I think it is. Yeah, it affects it for sure. Yeah, trying to do both things at the same time. I'll just reopen that. Yeah, definitely.
So this actually is a physical texture on the wall, right?
Correct.
So you can use that to create electrode to burn.
Oh, Yes, I know what you mean. Yes, well, kind of. Um, you have to be careful how you make it. But I think so. Essentially, you want to make like a Boolean subtract and make a cavity of that. Is that kind of what you mean?
Um, or how it's different.
I gotcha. So it can be varying degrees of legitimate. So I'm trying to figure out. I don't know what is going on because my SolidWorks is not. No, it's not what I want to do. Sorry, technical difficulties. You know what? I'm gonna try a different version of SolidWorks because I don't know what was going on there. Hopefully 2023 works better for me. I would just demo it in 2022. We use a lot of different versions of SolidWorks here, so that's why we have different versions loaded.
So that was available in older versions.
Correct. Up to I think 20. You might know better, but I think 2021 or something. The 3D texture. I think.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years now.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe 2020. It's definitely been in SolidWorks for a little while. That being said, I do think it's been improved, so it might be like 2021 or something. I think it got a little bit better, so it might have been there a little bit older, but yeah, I believe all versions have it. I'm pretty sure. Don't hold me to that in case I'm wrong. But I think that's accurate. I'm sure you don't know offhand.
No, I don't know.
Okay, yeah. I do think it's in all versions. I think I've done it in all our licenses. Okay, now that we're back here, sorry about that. So I'm just gonna reapply that surface really quick. Really any surface. So actually here, I'll do this with the built-in SolidWorks one, just to show you now that that'll probably work. So here's a bow tie, and I'll map it. Oh yeah, SolidWorks does give some. So if you go to basic, the menu looks a little bit different. I didn't think to cover that because mine's always on advanced, but you have some similar options. They're just a little more simple, but I would probably just go to advanced and you can kind of play with the details there. But anyway, once you have that surface, so the tool that you're looking for, I think you were asking like, how did I change it over? You need to run the 3D texture tool. And then that will be the feature that is ultimately changing your file to an STL. And then to answer your question, Frank, how valid is the surface? It really depends, granted, on the given model and how maybe complex it is. But I have been able to use it as a surface before. What you may have to do though, because sometimes SolidWorks, as I think we all also know, is you need to know your workarounds. Is if it's not doing a good job of if you can't basically kind of trick it into letting you use it here in this feature tree, then save it out as an STL and re-import it, and then you'll get a better surface. It'll still be a tessellated surface because there's that's just is what it is, but you can often get it to give you a surface rather than a proper surface rather than just a graphics body. And then you can actually utilize it as like a Boolean subtract if you want to use it to like make a mold or something from that. And that's actually totally something we've done. So I know you can do it. But there is a little bit of possible working around some limitations.